Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. In this week's episode, we'll be covering Doctor Who The Four Doctors, a crossover miniseries. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Cultured Pull List, part of the Cultured Nerd Podcast Network. We are your hosts, Mike and Luke, and recently some like three Doctor Who specials were released that brought back David Tennant's Doctor. So, kind of in honor of that, we are covering this crossover comic, which honestly I didn't know existed until recently. But apparently, this publisher, I think they're called Titan Comics. They publish a lot of Doctor Who comics. I think they're a UK based
Mhm.
um, publishing company, but they're actually doing the like this tie-in, I guess, prequel comic for the Zack Snyder movie Rebel
Mhm.
Moon,
Okay.
which is interesting. I didn't realize that,
Yeah.
but yeah, before we get into it, I kind of wanted to know what your experience with Doctor Who is.
Yeah, other than I think it was the 2021 Halloween special. Other than that, I haven't
Okay,
seen anything related to Doctor Who or any comics or anything like that at all.
what
So,
was the was wait was that the Jodie Whittaker
yeah,
Doctor
it was
then?
Jodie
Okay,
Whittaker, and then there was, like, Weeping Angels. I don't really remember exactly the details
okay.
of it, but it was just on TV, and so we were just watching it for
I'm
some
sure I've seen that because so I'm not really like a huge Doctor Who fan, but I think for the average person, I'm a fan because I
Mhm.
have seen like pretty much mostly just like the rebooted series, like in 2005 on. So I've
Mhm.
seen like a lot of the like first few seasons, but then like pretty much Matt Smith on. I've seen pretty much all of it at some point, but like it's fun. Like I don't like I'm not super into it, like oh my god, but I'm into it in that like okay, yeah, it's fun. I've seen it, but yeah, for those of you who don't know, yeah, Doctor Who's this big British show, but on since the 60s, come back and forth. A lot of times been canceled and come back, rebooted. But yeah, it's basically this Time Lord alien guy who travels around in different time periods in this time travel ship called the TARDIS that looks like an old police box. And kind of as a scapegoat for like continuing the series forever, they bring in new actors and the Doctor
Mhm.
like regenerates whenever he's going to die soon. But like the four like main ones so far in like because this story was published in 2015, so
Mhm.
Peter Capaldi was the current Doctor, and then the first one of the newest series was Christopher Eccleston, then David Tennant and Matt Smith, and David Tennant and Matt Smith are like I think the most popular ones.
Mhm.
But there's been a couple since then. But then like the new specials brought back David Tennant, and there was kind of like a twist with that. But yeah, let's get into this crossover Doctor Who comic series. So this was written by Paul Cornell with art by Neil Edwards. Inker was Ivan Nunes, and the letterers were Richard Starkings and Comicraft's Jimmy Betancourt. And this is a 5-issue series that was published between August and September of 2015. Also in this series, the David Tennant Doctor, the 10th Doctor, and the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith Doctor, they both have companions, Gabby and Alice, and they're both, as far as I know, comic exclusive companions. They
Okay.
weren't ever in the series, but Clara, who is the Peter Capaldi companion, was the current companion in the series when they wrote this. So she's like, yeah, she was in the show. But anyway, so this book starts out going back to the Time War, which is like a huge pivotal like moment in the Doctor's history, and we see the War Doctor, who is like that was his incarnation during the Time War, and we see him like talking with these um this alien race on this planet called Moktek, and it seems like he brought them there to like thrive as a species, I guess. Or no, yeah, what's it's okay, the planet isn't called Moktek. I forget what it's called. But anyway, the doctor brought them there, and this race is called the Vord, and they're afraid that after the Time War ends, the Time Lords will take their power away, basically, and the doctor promises them that he'll do everything he can to not let that happen. And we see that the Vords power kind of derives from a hive mind, and it seems like they're just kind of like a metal. It seems like they're kind of like comprised of liquid metal, and they just kind of like take over other species' bodies, seemingly exclusively humanoid. And we see when one dies, the like armor just kind of goes over to another person. So then in I guess the present day, well, I mean kind of outside of time and space, but we see Clara is with the current doctor, the 12th doctor, or the Peter Capaldi doctor, and asking him about this one planet. I can't remember what the hell the planet's name was. It starts with an M though, and we
Yeah,
get to it later. But
I do not know.
um, he's asking she's asking the doctor about this planet. He doesn't really know anything about it, and we're not really sure why Clara wants to know. But she has some photo
Mhm,
of the David Tennant doctor, the Matt Smith doctor, and the Peter Capaldi doctor. I'm just gonna call them the 10th, 11th, and 12th.
mhm,
Um, but apparently they all meet in this photo in Paris in 1923. So she brings the TARDIS there to figure out what's going on, and we see the 10th Doctor with his companion at the time, Gabby, and she's actually American. She's like one of the only American companions I think he's ever
mhm,
had, but they end up stopping off at this little cafe in Paris, and then we also see the 11th Doctor with his companion Alice, and he runs to go get some comics. He's really into these French comic books, but Alice goes in and like saves them a seat at this cafe. And we see Clara's already there, and she goes over to Alice and Gabby, and knowing that they're the companions of the doctor, she like explains what's going on and was like, we can't let our doctors meet. And she explains that she went to this when she was on some adventure to this planet on this planet with the 12th doctor, her doctor. Um, she ran across some weird like museum, and in this museum there was like some weird computer thing that basically showed her a bunch of these crazy nexus events, and these events would kind of destroy time and space, and one of these events was the three doctors meeting, and she was basically told she has to stop this from happening. But right when she's through explaining to Alice and Gabby, the 10th and 11th doctors come bursting through the door. Oh, also, this kind of comes into play a little bit later, but Clara was the 11th doctor's companion as well. And she was with him when he like regenerated into the 12th doctor. So she's kind of like a holdover companion.
okay,
But that's what like later on in this story, the 11th doctor like recognizes Clara. So yeah, that's so the two doctors pop out at the same time. They start like freaking out because the 11th doctor recognizes his old face, but the 10th doctor isn't really believing that's his future self yet, and they're kind of like trying to figure out what's going on. And then just then the 12th doctor bursts in, is like, oh, I know you took the TARDIS, yeah, I know you messed with it and took us to Paris, Clara. And then all three of the doctors kind of start arguing over like if this is real or not. And then as they're arguing, their fingers touch, and like this big burst of energy pops out, and that convinces them that they are actually different versions of the same doctor. And right when this happens, these things called Reapers pop out, and they basically show up to kind of whenever there's some sort of Nexus event type thing that threatens to kind of destroy the timeline. They show up and just like prune whatever like extra dimensional energy is there. So the doctors and their companions try and fight these Reavers off, but nothing really helps. And there's this interesting thing we see a few times throughout this book where each of the doctors has a different idea for how to deal with the situation.
mhm,
So like here they all three say we need to, then the 10th says set up a force field, the 11th says create a diversion, the 12th says find the oldest thing here. And so that kind of is a running theme throughout the whole story, but they eventually decide to just make a run for it, and they get split up. I think the 11th doctor goes off so somewhere, but the rest of them find the TARDIS, and they try to get inside, but their keys don't seem to work. And I guess the 12th doctor figures out they both figure out that they need to like create enough like temporal energy to like be recognized as the doctor or something so that it'll actually work, because they open it but it's just a normal police box. Basically it's not like the TARDIS, so they touch each other again and make this giant like energy storm, which brings brings back the TARDIS. And so they run inside. The Reavers follow them though, so they keep going deeper into the TARDIS. It seems like all three of the TARDISes are kind of like occupying the same space in a way. So as they go deeper into like the one TARDIS, which I think this is the 11th Doctor's TARDIS, then they go into the 10th Doctor's, and like they keep going into like the different forms of each Doctor's TARDIS. And as they go deeper, it's harder for the Reavers to get to them, because it's like too much temporal energy for them to consume. And once they get, yeah, they go through all of them. There's the 12th, the 11th, then the 10th. And once they get to the 10th, they split apart. The 12th Doctor causes them to split apart, and they all end up back in France where they were to begin with. And Clara like explains why she brought them there, and like how like this kind of wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to meet, but now that they have, this picture hasn't been taken yet, so they can just like screw off and not not make this happen. But they don't do that, and they all end up going to the same planet that she mentioned, to try and figure out what's going on, which was her fear to begin with. And the 10th Doctor says, well, I mean, if we all just make sure we don't make these poses in the photo, then this photo can't happen. And like the event, the weird, crazy event can't happen. But then they start getting attacked by some unknown enemy. And just so happens, as they're arguing over what to do to take on this enemy, they make the exact poses that are in the photo, and the photo gets taken. Turns out that they're being attacked by the Vord that we saw at the beginning. And eventually, after being attacked several times, they all just decide to run again. And there's like this weird maze on this planet that they end up running into to try to duck for cover. And they end up switching companions, which leads to like some interesting conversations. But Clara ends up back with the 11th Doctor, and like she like kind of she doesn't really tell him like what happens in the future necessarily, but they kind of have a bit of a reunion. And then I think, yeah, Alice ends up with the 10th Doctor and Gabby with the 12th. But they all end up finding each other in the middle of the maze, and they find this thing called a continuity bomb, which apparently when it goes off, it makes you live some like branch timeline, like basically like a crossroads decision you could have made. It kind of forces you to live the other decision, which causes another timeline. So first we see some decision that the 10th Doctor made. I don't know if this is in the show or not, to be honest, but apparently in this other timeline, he lets somebody die to save his own life. Oh yeah, actually, I think I do remember. I think this was like the end of this version of the Doctor, and he was like supposed to absorb a bunch of radiation to save somebody. But he let the person die instead and kept on living. And then in this timeline, he ends up becoming like some overlord. But then he ends up getting assassinated anyway and dies anyway. And then we see the 11th Doctor. There's some weird thing with his wife where like I guess like everything from all periods of time or something are collected in this one area. And like in the normal timeline, he's supposed to reset everything, I guess, but in this timeline, he just like let it happen. So he and his wife are living in this world where everything in history is happening all at once. Um, and then we see the 12th Doctor's alternate timeline where he's some like old homeless guy, it seems like. And I guess Clara betrayed him, and now he's off on his own, just like being a hermit. So to get out of the continuity bomb, they basically have to choose a timeline to actually stick to and be a part of. So considering this is the least destructive, they decide to be part of this timeline, and they enlist this even older version of the older Doctor's help to get them out of this timeline. So after some convincing, and after he's shocked to see Clara again, I think it's Clara actually that ends up kind of like convincing him to help them. So he uses the TARDIS to get them like kind of out of the time stream, out of the continuity bomb time stream, and he ends up like bringing them out where he says the only place that he could is like this weird like kind of place out of time, and so they step out of the TARDIS to see where they are. They're in some weird like pocket dimension type space, and they're surrounded by they're in like this city surrounded by this force field that apparently is holding back this lake or this sea of acid, which is fun. But then they are once again attacked by the Vord, and it turns out that this version of the Doctor, this older version, has been playing them, and he's actually the Vord's leaders, and he puts on like his special metal alien suit, and that's where this half ends.
Before we jump into this, I just want to uh, apologize. I'm not familiar with Doctor Who, so it's going to kind of show, but I'll do my best. Um, so we pick up right where we left off with the older version of Peter Capaldi. He's the head of this species. It's like a hive mind. Once you put on the suit, like you kind of control all of the different other people that are also in the suits, and he's kind of like the head of this like the city that's like you mentioned that was kind of closed off from like an acid lake or whatever. So he puts all of them in like these handcuffs, and they they do a little bit of banter and they try to escape, but then they kind of trick him into explaining his whole plan and like his backstory. So this is I think this is the same. This is after the time war you mentioned, or is this completely different?
This is, I think, around the same time or after
Okay.
that this starts.
Yeah, and so then this species is here, and then they kind of do. They kind of built. It's kind of going into the story of how they built the city, and I'm not sure if they explain at what point um, the future Peter Capaldi joins up with them, but at some
Mm-hmm.
point that he in the future puts the museum on that other planet they went to in order to ensure he exists because he kind of put the pieces together so that um, so that all the doctors could meet and then kind of triggered this event that set off the continuity bomb that kind of created him. And so he has to put the
Right.
museum there to kind of lay all the groundwork for that, which is just kind of what I just explained. Yeah, and so what they're trying to what the alternate Capaldi is trying to do now is he's going to kill some of them, but then send some of the other ones back, like because was it Clara, the one who went to the museum?
Yeah.
Okay, so he needs to send this version of Clara back to kind of make sure all of this stuff the loop continues to happen. But then he
Mm-hmm.
needs to kill these versions of all the other characters so that they don't know. So that when Clara goes back, it's the original versions that are completely unaware of everything that's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then like a fight breaks out and they all get separated, and so these two, Clara and I don't know this other person's name.
No, it's Gabby and Alice.
Gabby and Alice. Okay, yeah. Okay, Gabby and Alice. They kind of they get free, but all the others are tied up to this machine that is kind of powering the device that's going to send Clara back to kind of set this whole thing in motion again.
Mm-hmm.
And then they find the alternate Capaldi's TARDIS, and a because it is a hive mind, he doesn't actually need to hide it anywhere because he's in control of everybody. So he's not really worried about that, which is why they're able to get into it as easily as they can. And just as um, they're about to get away, one of them gets shot, and then the other one opens
Yeah,
up.
Alice is the
Alice
one that gets shot. I think. Yeah.
Alice gets shot, and then Gabby opens up the French comic books, and it's actually a weeping angel, and she is able to, through that, kind of reset, kind of go back to the beginning of the story.
Yeah, because like the way the Weeping Angels work
Mhm.
is if they touch you, they like send you back in
Okay.
time. And I guess the way this one was like made, it like only it sends you back to that specific time in the cafe, which Gabby gets
Hmm.
sent.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so that she gets sent back to there, and so now there's 2 versions of Gabby, and they're trying to explain everything that's gonna happen, and, one confrontation between 3 doctors and a lengthy explanation later, they're all on the same page about it, so now they're all going to basically get back to the continuity bomb so that they can try to finally defeat the alternate version of Capaldi. They do that, and the our version, quote unquote,
Yeah.
kind of tricks the hive mind into letting him join them, and so he's able to kind of confront himself, the other version of himself, and
Mhm.
kind of like convince him to stop. And then the others, while it doesn't really show it, but while the others were, while this is happening, the others are kind of doing. I forget what he's doing over here, but he's doing something. Um, no, he's tearing down the force field, so that would basically have to confront the other Capaldi and be like, if you don't like stop this, we're going to basically destroy this whole civilization.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, he's able to Marinus, I think is what it was called.
Right, there we go, finally.
Um, yeah, so it kind of goes back to normal, and this is the other version of the Doctor I think you mentioned. Uh,
Yeah, the Christopher Eccleston one. Yeah,
yeah.
and that's something too that we forgot to mention, but the Vord weren't supposed to be, like be that powerful. They
Mm,
were just supposed to be like a normalish planet, but I'm not sure like when exactly it was, but at some point they were like able to become a hive mind and like master time and space or something.
mm,
And I think that happened like during the Time War or something. And
okay.
so that's like the power they were afraid of losing at the
Mhm.
beginning or something. But yeah, but now that they did this, they're just like back to their how the Vord was supposed to be, like those
Right.
smaller little creatures, you know.
Right. Yeah. So basically, now that's all the day saved. Everyone kind of says their goodbyes and goes their separate ways, and then there's kind of a final conversation between Peter Capaldi and Clara about how like because basically the whole thing that set this off was that at some point in the future she was going to betray him, and so
Hmm.
they kind of like they have this final discussion about how hopefully that won't happen, and if it does, they'll be able to remedy it hopefully. So this whole thing doesn't happen again, and that is the story.
Yeah, I kind of forget if that actually happens in the show or not.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, what did you so? How do you feel about kind of be throwing into the deep end of Doctor Who with this?
Um, I mean, I understood the story, like, I
Yeah.
can understand the plot elements, but a lot of
Hmm.
it was very confusing, so
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I feel like the plot itself not only was kind of um like I don't know, reminiscent of a lot of the shows in a
Mhm.
way. But I feel like you didn't necessarily need to know the history of the Doctor to get the story.
Yeah,
Like I feel like it was kind of confusing anyway, like like no matter what. But yeah, like to
yeah.
get a lot of the other references and what's going on, yeah, I feel
Mhm,
like
mhm.
you kind of have to. But yeah, so that being said, what did you think?
Thought it was good.
Hmm.
There's like I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff I just didn't get, but I thought
Yeah.
it was good enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I thought it was fun. I mean, there was definitely like some kind of convoluted plot points
Mhm.
when it kind of happens every time you do like time travel stuff.
Yeah.
But like for me, it was kind of fun seeing, even though it was a comic book, seeing like the three different versions of the Doctor that I
Mhm.
was familiar with, and do kind of, I do think it's kind of cool that each version of the Doctor, in the show, has their own personality in a way, even though they're kind of like the same
Yeah.
character, and they think they did a pretty good job capturing that in the book.
Mhm.
Um, and I did kind of like the little reference to the Christopher Eccleston Doctor at the end because he hardly ever like. I feel like he's never really mentioned.
Mhm.
A lot of times he kind of gets like glossed over. He's kind of an underrated version, so I kind of liked that they showed him in the book. But yeah, pretty interesting. I really haven't seen the specials yet. I kind of thought I would, but at this point, but
Mhm.
so the new specials that came out on Disney Plus. I think
Mhm.
it's kind of funny. I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but I've seen some people like online kind of freaking out about it, saying that it's woke. Which,
Mhm.
if you've watched Doctor Who at all, it's pretty like there's plenty of gay characters and like a lot of people. So it's like even like one of the newest companions was gay. It's just like,
Mhm.
okay, it's kind of been woke for a while, but this is apparently a scene that like people were freaking out about for being woke.
Me. Yes, the meat. I promise I can help him get home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she or they?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the me.
Oh, I do that.
So apparently people were mad, being like the doctor's being lectured about pronouns. I'm like, bruh, it's like an alien. Like
Yeah.
it's obviously a little joke. It's yeah. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the four doctors, kind of fun. I kind of want to do something a little different. This is like the
Mhm.
only like non like major
Yeah.
comic publisher we covered. Like not like DC or Marvel or Image.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was actually supposed to come out last week, but I got sick and a bunch of other stuff
Mhm.
happened. But this is our second to last episode of this season. So
Yeah.
episode 40 will be the last episode of season 1 of the Cultured Pull
Mhm.
List. And we're going to be covering a Batman Noel, a Christmas story. So yeah, that will be our last one though, and then we will be back in January.
Mhm.
But before we wrap up our second to last episode of season 1, what is your cultured pick for this week?
This week I picked up, I believe it's called Batman Santa Claus Silent Nights, I think. It's called.
Nice.
It came out last week, and basically it's just a story where Batman and kind of the whole Bat family team up with Santa Claus to fight Krampus, and it's
Oh, that
it's pretty
sounds
cool.
kind of fun. Yeah, yeah, that sounds cool. I think I just saw like somebody posted like a screenshot of
Mhm.
like the end of the comic of like
Yeah.
Nightwing saying something about like, or is Nightwing or Robin saying something about like Batman always told me these stories of his adventures with like Santa,
Yeah.
but I never believed him or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I think it's the beginning of a 4 or 5 issue miniseries, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was really cool. So,
Okay. Nice. My pick this week is actually like kind of a 3-issue arc, and it's actually from the Spectacular Spider-Man series, and these came out in actually 1985.
Mhm.
But there's this interesting arc that's kind of like a murder mystery, but there's this guy going around called the Sin Eater. And he's basically just a dude with a double barrel shotgun, like shooting people.
Mhm.
But he's basically shooting these people that like he considers have abused their power. So they've been like cops and judges and stuff like that. But the whole story is kind of this cool like Daredevil Spider-Man team up for most of it. And Peter does have the black suit at this point, but I don't think they revealed in the comics that it was actually like an alien until like 88 or something.
Mhm.
So at this point, he's just wearing a suit. So there are a few times in this where he acts really out of character. And I feel like
Mhm.
it would have been really interesting as a fan to read that at the time, be like, why is Pete acting like such a dick?
Yeah.
When you didn't know that it was the suit doing that with him yet. But yeah, so it was pretty interesting. It was like a murder mystery. And like, it turns out like the Sin Eater was kind of like he ends up being somebody kind of personal to Peter,
Mhm.
and he actually has powers too. Apparently, he was like part of the Shield experiment, or something like this. Kind of, they're basically like giving people drugs, like cocaine and meth and stuff, and like trying to see if they can make like super soldiers with like those effects. But it ends
Nice.
up making him insane, surprisingly. Who would have thought? But yeah, so I just thought that I just read it the other night. I think I picked
Mhm.
them up like at Comic-Con recently. But yeah, it was kind of a cool arc. I was kind of surprised how interesting and engrossing it was. But
Mhm.
yeah, pretty fun. So this ends our episode 39, season 1. We
Mhm.
will be back next week, and then you won't see us for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
This has been TCN Presents The Cultured Pull List. If you would like to support us on Patreon to help us bring you more content, check us out at patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show-specific tier if you would like to support our shows. I have been your host, Michael Malillo. My co-host has been Luke S. Our logo was designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by me. Thank you so much for joining us. please like and subscribe. That really helps a lot. Scan the QR code on the bottom left to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media. And scan the QR code on the bottom right to check out me and Luke's other brand, Casual Experts, on social media, YouTube, and our other podcast. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.